Too bad 21st century telescopes were poorly designed, and the supposedly habitable planets found were actually desolate. Elton John is taken hostage before he can start his dream job. Now he and a multicultural science team are racing against humans' inevitable self-imposed demise to invent a faster-than-light phone. After all, how useful is another Earth after civilization collapses? Civilization goes through cycles. Humanity's first test explores how humans will react to encountering a similarly advanced alien civilization with supremely powerful AI predicting world events. Humans must navigate through internal struggles, new challenges, and interference from a new galactic neighbor. Will we default to old habits of conquest and exploit, or will we move beyond to a galactic inclusive society and pass our first test? Humanity's first test, written by Anuncio Ramirez Batista, narrated by Caitlin Kraft. All right, welcome back to another audiobook review. Um, I want to start by saying I'm sorry this is a little late in the week. Normally this would have came out Monday. I wasn't feeling very well, so I had a hard time getting this up, but I'm feeling better. So we're gonna dive into this audiobook that I just finished. Um, Also, I didn't change the cover and title section, but I just want to make a note that when I'm going to bring up something during that and what I'm going to bring up, um, it covers the blurb as well. This is the cover and title section is more the first look. This is the way you first look at the book, and I want to bring that up. So I know I don't normally bring up the blurbs, but I will in this case. So let's go ahead and jump in. So starting with the cover and title and blurb. I would honestly give this 4 stars. The cover is not horrible. It also doesn't really stand out. I mean, the computerized CGI alien and human. I mean, that background just looks like something from like a really outdated game. Maybe it is. I don't know. But it just doesn't look great. It's like sitting through The Mummy Returns, and then we get that computer animation of The Rock at the end as the Scorpion King. My first glance of the cover, that's one of the issues. Um, Secondly, also about the cover, um, I mean, the narrator and the author's name are fine. For me, the issue is with the title. It really doesn't stand out. I wouldn't have a clue what this was. Like, if I didn't know, if I don't see this on a shelf and I'm not picking up, I mean, obviously it says books 1 through 5, but I'm just saying the title doesn't really pop off of the cover itself. It doesn't have its own identity apart from all the other text. So I do like the part at the top with like the space and I don't know what that line is supposed to represent, but I do. I mean, it kind of looks cool. The author's name and narrator's name are okay, but for me, the actual title of the book, though itself, Humanity's First Test, I really do like that. The actual title, Humanity's First Test, I really do like that. Um, it's sort of it's better than some titles because like some titles are just like one, two, three, four. They just tack on a number. Some titles, which I'm a part of this one, so I know. Uh, for instance, like the Harry Potter route, where you have a different title, but it starts the same. So unless you know going in, like, oh, this is book one, this is book two, for example, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is book one, Chamber of Secrets is book two. People just drop the whole Harry Potter. Um, but if you didn't know that, you wouldn't know which one was which. This is more like Ready Player One, and then we got Ready Player Two. Supposedly, I think we're supposed to get like Ready Player Three. So I do like it on that aspect. It's not a horrible cover. I've seen worse. Um, Now the blurb. If I was browsing through books, being that I don't really agree with certain politics and the way things are being handled in the world right now, uh, the blurb would have turned me off. And I don't think that you should. There are certain words you shouldn't be using right now. Inclusive society is the biggest one that stood out for me because it's like, oh my god, if I had read this blurb before actually reading the book, I might have said no, thank you. It's true there are some things in the book that are a bit that direction. I'm not going to say what direction it is. You all know. If you've been on this channel a while, you understand. Um, but yeah, I would have seen that word inclusive, and I would have been like, oh yeah, no, thank you. I don't need a lesson. I don't need you trying to teach me a lesson, and I don't care to learn a lesson. But luckily, I had listened to the book before, so I did give it a shot. So that's why. Now let's move on to the narration. And the narration is also going to get 4 stars. This is usually the best narrators can usually expect, by the way. I'm not saying the narrator did a bad job. They did fine. They read fine. I mean, there was one point where the audio sounded very differently than the rest. And there was a couple times, I'm not sure if it was her editing or a mistake in the book, since I didn't actually physically read the book. I'm just listening to it. But there was like 1 or 2 times where she repeats a line twice in a row. And maybe that was intended by the writer, I don't know. But if it was just an editing mistake, then she didn't catch it. Which it doesn't draw you too much out of the book. I'll get into that later. But yeah. Now moving on to I'm gonna go with characters now. I'm throwing these a little out of order. Um, the characters are gonna get 5 stars here. I think all the characters were really well done. The character relationships were done well. I mean, I would have liked to have seen more, but I'll get into that when I get into story. Um, but the characters themselves, they acted, you know, pretty reasonably and stuff, and I had no real issues. I enjoyed, the characters and their journey. So yeah. Now we're gonna move on to the story. And story, there's a part of this I'm gonna wait until I get to the writing. But I'm giving the story 4 stars. Um so the reason it gets 4 stars is because of the fact that there are large sections of this book or books because it says it's like books 1 through 5, but it is one book, so I don't know. Maybe the author released this originally as mini books. Maybe it wasn't meant to be consumed on such a big level, and that's what's hurting it here. I mean, the story is fine. There was just many parts where story wise, not a lot is happening. And that's going to be my biggest detractor when we get to the next section. But I loved the idea because me and my friend had just recently had a conversation about what if mankind goes to space and we meet an alien race and we're actually the aggressors. We're actually the ones that take over them. And he was debating, he's like, no, if we go to space, then we meet another alien race that's been doing it longer than we have. They're going to kick our butts. And it's like, maybe, maybe not. This isn't really that big a spoiler. So, I mean, what if we go to space and we meet a race whose primary and only focus has been traveling? Maybe they never had a lot of conflict. Maybe they've been searching for so long that they have lived so peacefully they never needed to really develop weapons. Do they have some? Yeah, sure. They have things to destroy an asteroid, but it's a slow, careful, pinpointed weapon. It's not meant for fighting in a war because they don't have that concept of war and everything. But they are still technologically advanced, and because they haven't had wars, maybe without the weapons, that has put them in a bad spot. They never considered that, oh, if we go to space, we might meet a warfaring race, and we may need weapons and shields, whereas we are a warfaring race. So, because we had that conversation, it made me actually like the book more because it kind of that's not exactly what happened, but it leans heavily in that direction. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think just because race has been traveling through the universe longer than us that they would immediately win in a fight? All right, now moving on to the writing. And for the writing, I want to give this 4 stars. I'm being generous here. It almost it came very close to 3 stars. But I'm gonna go with 4 because it is well written. It's definitely well written. But everything the writer does throughout the book, he wrote where I wanted more because nothing was really going on, but he was just like spouting out tons of technical dialogue. Like he goes through the ship and he's telling us how the engines work. And I don't know if the guy is a scientist, if any of this is real science or not, but if even if it's all made up, it's like, okay, there was probably a better way you could have delivered some of this to us rather than big info dumps. I mean, I'm talking huge info dumps. Like, okay, all right, I am lost, and I'm usually pretty understanding when it comes to science fiction and science terms. You know, I understand some of the basics of different theories and stuff. I'm not the smartest man in the world, so on that level, it's like I don't need to hear all this. Just get back to the story. And yeah, there's little bits of story, little bits of lore and history sprinkled in there, but it seemed more like a point where the writer just wanted to come up with their own means and fully tell you how everything works. And I'm like, oh my god, get back to the story. And that's the other part too. Now that we're talking about the story, is there is a big section like in the middle where not a lot is happening. And there's also some time jumps where 10 years goes by, 20 years goes by, and it's like, you know, I think they should have done more to. There should have been something more. Like if you were reading in a book, maybe a single page between chapters that says 20 years later, have the narrator stop, 20 years later. I didn't hear any of that. Basically, it's presented to us as, like a few paragraphs into a new chapter or something, where it's like, oh, she had been in prison for 5 years. Like, oh, okay, so now we're jumping forward after we've already learned that what she's going through and her, like, she's sitting down to talk to someone, and she'll be like, yeah, I've been here for 5 years now. What's going on? I'm not saying that's exactly in the book, but I'm saying that's how it's delivered, which can be a little confusing when you're going into a new chapter and you're trying to find out, like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on now? You're constantly having to play catch up. Um, I did like how the story was written in a way that the narrator sort of it sort of came across as somebody is telling the story. Um, but yeah, the biggest drawback for me here was just the fact that it's like so heavy on nothing really going on, nothing really happening. Or I mean, there's things happening, but it's not that interesting. The most interesting stuff I found was there was a whole thing at the beginning of the book which puts our main characters on the path of which they're going. There's this whole thing about Earth, and there's maybe some hints at some kind of love affair between characters. I would have liked to have seen that explored a little bit more. Um, there is some stuff with the aliens, once the aliens first come into the picture, that was really good. Um, and then towards the end, there was some stuff. When it's actually trying to tell the story and not trying to tell you a history lesson or a science lesson, that's when the book is probably the most interesting. But at the same time, it's yes, it's not my story, but there is some setups for things that just don't pan out. There is some setups like, oh, these two characters might have an affair, and this dude's married, and that doesn't happen. They talk about this one girl and how beautiful she is. So I'm thinking, oh, she's so beautiful, somebody's gonna try to have an affair with her. And nope, we never get that. Just that she has many partners. We don't even see any of them. It's just kind of blown up in the background, like, oh, it happened, and now she's single, and she's got 8 kids. So, yeah, we are going to take a break. There were no extras, and just to be clear, when I say extras, I mean extra people helping out with narration, um, sound effects, music, anything like that. So, I will see you all in a little bit. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll give my final score and thoughts.
For thousands of years, the world has been protected by the Guardian of Light, or as he is more commonly known, Santa Claus. Over the centuries, factors such as fear and prejudice, greed and jealousy, misunderstandings, betrayal and war have segregated most humans from the magical world of elves, fairies, wizards, and the like. This has resulted in many misconceptions and generalizations of the true nature of Santa and his world.
This 6-book series by Sean Connaughton begins as the current of a long series of guardians is murdered by a group of monstrous enemies recently escaped from an enchanted South Pole prison. These creatures are loyal to the darkness, an evil force determined to exterminate the light in order to enslave all creatures of the world.
Shane Connor, an average young man, suddenly finds himself being trained as the new guardian. As he adapts to his new life among fantastic creatures, he goes on an adventurous quest with a legendary wizard for the ultimate weapon to use against the darkness, and faces murderous enemies like Rasputin, Morgana Le Fay, Krampus, and many more.
Along with his best friend Joe Gomez, Shane encounters politics, history, mysterious murders, new loves, his own hidden past, and racial dynamics among the fantasy races that turn out to be all too real. Their adventures reveal the true nature of the world and challenge the current state of how all races interact.
This series expertly melds myths, legends, history, faiths, folklore, and secret societies into a fascinating, cohesive, comprehensive world of wonder and magic.
From Atlantis to Olympus, from Hades to the moon, and from broomstick races to Christmas deadlines, join the new Santa Claus on his amazing journey. But beware! Will Shane's quest achieve his ultimate goal of destroying the darkness and preserving the light of the world? Or is he actually playing right into a plot by dark forces that will result in his, and our, ultimate doom?
So make your list and check it twice for the Guardian of Light book series. Download your audiobook or ebook today from Audible, Amazon, or iTunes.
All right, so Humanity's First Test, books 1 through 5. My final score on this has to be probably a 7 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. like I said, for me, the biggest issues was probably when ever the author starts going into details about how things work on a scientific level, and sometimes it just goes on a little too long. I think that the writing style was very much like Ready Player One. It felt like somebody was narrating the story rather than I was listening to a story. Um, so, like, I felt like I was hearing it from the point of view of a character in the book. But then, like I said, with some of the scientific stuff, it just goes on and on and on. And it's like, oh my gosh, get back to the main story. Get back to what's going on. I think a little minor tweaking to the cover would probably be really good for the author to consider. Like I said, maybe expand where it says humanity's first test. If you really think that covers are the biggest selling points. Um, but yeah, I did enjoy it, and there is enough sequel baiting to make me want to possibly check out whatever comes next. I don't think it's horrible. I think it's a good starting point for this series, and that's the other thing too is they do kind of hint that there's might at the very minimum that this will probably be a trilogy. So, yeah, if you want to check this out, please be sure to do so. If you know science fiction is your thing, if you want a different view than most science fiction stories normally take on how we might react moving into the galaxy, this is definitely one to check out. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and end this review here. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next review. Bye.